He was the last man anyone expected to vanish without a trace. Major Richard Thompson was a decorated fighter pilot, respected by everyone in his squadron. Tall, square-jawed, with over 200 combat missions during the height of the Cold War, Thompson represented everything an American military pilot should be: skilled, fearless, precise. On a crisp October morning in 1967, Thompson launched from Ramstein Air Base in Germany, piloting an F-4 Phantom jet. His mission was routine reconnaissance along the East German border, a route he'd flown dozens of times before, but something was different that day. Radar operators tracked Thompson's jet for approximately 47 minutes before his transmission suddenly changed. His typically calm eyes became strange, agitated. Something was clearly wrong. "Command, I'm seeing something unusual," Thompson radioed. His eyes was different, not panicked, but confused. Like he was witnessing something he couldn't explain. Then silence. Complete radio silence. Search teams were mobilized immediately. Military helicopters and ground units scoured the precise route Thompson had been flying. They found nothing. No wreckage. No debris field. No signs of mechanical failure. Just empty forest and rolling German countryside. Thompson's squadron commander, Major Frank Reynolds, remembered the day vividly. "Richard was our most experienced pilot. If something went wrong with his aircraft, he would have reported it. He would have found a way to land or eject. But Thompson didn't eject. He didn't crash. He simply disappeared." Military investigations were exhaustive. They interviewed every radar operator. They reviewed communication logs. They traced Thompson's exact flight path using multiple tracking stations. Nothing added up. The official report listed Thompson as missing in action, a classification that meant the military acknowledged his disappearance but couldn't confirm what happened. Years passed. Decades, actually. Thompson's wife Margaret never remarried. She kept hoping, believing somehow her husband would return. He was out there somewhere, she told investigators decades later. Richard was too good a pilot to just vanish. But vanish he did. What made Thompson's case so unusual wasn't just his disappearance. It was the strange radio transmission. That confused, slightly off-kilter communication that suggested something was happening beyond a standard mechanical failure. Military analysts would spend years reviewing those 47 minutes of flight data. They found no mechanical issues with Thompson's aircraft, no signs of external interference, no indications of enemy action, just a skilled pilot flying a perfect aircraft, who somehow ceased to exist. The case became legendary among military aviation circles. Some colleagues suggested Thompson might have defected, others believed he'd experienced some kind of navigational error. But those theories never quite fit the evidence. Thompson was a patriot, a man who dedicated his life to serving his country. Defection seemed impossible. By 1985, the official investigation was essentially closed. Thompson was legally declared deceased. His personal effects were returned to his family. His military pension was processed. But questions remained. What happened in those 47 minutes? What did Thompson see that made his radio transmission so strange? Why was there no evidence of his aircraft's destruction? The mystery of Major Richard Thompson continues to fascinate military historians and aviation experts to this day. Subscribe for more unexplained stories. Muller, then in his late 70s, described a strange event he witnessed in 1953 near the small village of Rothenburg ob der Tauber. On the precise day of Thompson's disappearance, Muller reported seeing an unusual atmospheric phenomenon, a shimmer in the sky that looked like heat distortion, but occurred on a cold autumn morning. "It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen," Muller told investigators. "The air seemed to fold, like a piece of fabric being bent, but with light and space itself." Military archivists were skeptical but intrigued. Muller's account was documented, but without physical evidence, it remained nothing more than an interesting footnote. What made Muller's testimony strong was its specific correlation with Thompson's last known coordinates. The location he described was within 3 kilometers of the last radio contact point. Coincidence? Possibly. But military researchers had learned that in unexplained cases, coincidences were rarely just coincidences. Using computer modeling and sophisticated signal analysis, they could now parse those 47 minutes of transmission with microscopic detail. At precisely 22 minutes into Thompson's final transmission, there was a momentary signal anomaly, a microsecond of data that didn't conform to standard electromagnetic wave patterns. Hartman noted in her classified report, "The signal passed through something, or something passed through the signal." Her analysis suggested an interference pattern inconsistent with known radio wave behaviors. The deviation was minimal, less than 0.0003 seconds, but it was definitively present. When colleagues suggested equipment malfunction, Hartman was adamant. Multiple redundant systems had recorded the same anomalous signature. This wasn't an error, this was something else. Thompson's case attracted renewed interest among a small but dedicated community of military historians and unexplained phenomena researchers. Online forums dedicated to the mystery began cross-referencing his disappearance with other similar aviation incidents from the Cold War era. A pattern began to emerge. Several other pilots from NATO squadrons had experienced comparable unexplained disappearances during the 1950s. While none were as carefully documented as Thompson's case, the similarities were striking. An Air Force captain named Robert Jenkins had vanished over the North Sea in 1956 under nearly identical circumstances. No wreckage, no distress signal, just gone. A Canadian reconnaissance pilot, Michael Donovan, disappeared over Greenland in 1954 with equally mysterious characteristics. His last transmission mentioned a strange light before communication abruptly ceased. These weren't just isolated incidents, they were pieces of a larger, more complex puzzle. Conspiracy theorists had their own explanations, of course. Others proposed extraterrestrial intervention. What if these disappearances represented something fundamental about the nature of space, time, and perception that current scientific understanding couldn't yet explain? Thompson's case remained the gold standard, the most thoroughly documented mysterious aviation disappearance of the mid-20th century. Decades passed and Thompson's case remained an enigma. Hidden within Thompson's original flight logs was a microscopic notation, a set of coordinates that didn't match standard navigation charts. Rodriguez cross-referenced these coordinates with geological survey maps and satellite imaging. What she found stunned her research team. Those precise coordinates corresponded to a geological anomaly in the remote Canadian tundra, a region where magnetic readings were consistently irregular. Ground-penetrating radar revealed an unusual subsurface formation that didn't match any known geological structure. A joint expedition was organized. Military historians, geologists, and electromagnetic specialists spent 3 weeks examining the site. Their equipment consistently malfunctioned, compasses spun wildly, radio signals became distorted, temperature readings fluctuated inexplicably. Spectroscopic analysis revealed it contained an alloy composition unlike anything in the periodic table. The material seemed to absorb and redirect electromagnetic waves in ways that defied current scientific understanding. Forensic analysis of the fragment suggested it had been exposed to temperatures and pressures inconsistent with Earth's natural environment. The fragment became the physical evidence that transformed Thompson's mysterious disappearance from speculation to documented phenomenon. While definitive conclusions remained elusive, the research suggested Thompson hadn't simply disappeared. Military records were quietly updated. His wife, Margaret Thompson, who had spent decades wondering about her husband's fate, received a sealed envelope containing limited details. Though the complete truth remained classified, she finally understood that her husband's disappearance wasn't a random tragedy, but something more complex. In a final twist, the research team determined that similar electromagnetic anomalies had been recorded in precisely 7 locations worldwide, each corresponding to a pilot's unexplained disappearance during the Cold War era. The mystery of Flight 117 was never fully solved. But it was no longer simply a mystery. Subscribe if this story interested you and you want to hear more like it. Elena Rodriguez's team began mapping the precise locations, creating a network that traced an almost perfect geometric pattern across remote regions of the planet. Each site represented a convergence point where traditional physics seemed to break down. Government archives from multiple nations slowly revealed connections. Declassified Soviet documents mirrored American reports of similar electromagnetic disturbances. Professor James Hartley from MIT's Advanced Electromagnetic Research Center reviewed the compiled data. Military intelligence reports from the 1950s and 1960s gradually emerged. Buried within thousands of pages of formerly classified documents were references to Project Meridian, a top-secret research initiative that had tracked these electromagnetic anomalies since 1952. The most startling revelation came from a marginally redacted report, dated November 17, 1959. It suggested that multiple governments were aware of these sites decades before modern researchers, but chose systematic suppression of information. Margaret Thompson, now in her late 80s, became an unexpected ally in the research. She shared personal correspondence and private documents that her husband had kept, providing crucial contextual evidence that connected seemingly disparate research threads. Geological core samples from the 7 identified sites revealed microscopic metallic structures that didn't match any known terrestrial composition. Each sample contained trace elements suggesting exposure to extreme environmental conditions beyond current scientific understanding. Major research institutions began allocating funding to study these electromagnetic convergence zones, recognizing them as potential windows into fundamental planetary dynamics. The final breakthrough came unexpectedly. Rodriguez's team discovered that these locations aligned precisely with ancient indigenous mapping traditions from cultures spanning multiple continents. Native oral histories had long spoken of places where reality bends, descriptions that now seemed prophetic. What happened to Flight 117 and its pilot remained partially obscured, but the research had transformed a mysterious disappearance into a gateway of scientific exploration, revealing that some mysteries are not meant to be completely solved, but understood incrementally. The electromagnetic anomalies continued to pulse silently, their secrets waiting for future generations to unravel. Subscribe if this story interested you and you want to hear more like it. In the years following Rodriguez's groundbreaking research, international scientific teams began establishing monitoring stations at these electromagnetic convergence points. Elena Rodriguez herself continued tracking the anomalies, her work now recognized by the global scientific community. The fate of Flight 117's pilot remained an open question. Fragments of the aircraft were eventually recovered near one of the convergence sites in the Andes Mountains, but critical evidence remained inconclusive. The final report from Rodriguez's team concluded that these sites were not anomalies to be feared, but natural phenomena waiting to be understood, potential windows into complex planetary energy systems that humanity was only beginning to comprehend. Subscribe if this story interested you, and you want to hear more like it. The conference marked a turning point. Governments and scientific institutions that had previously dismissed the research now recognized its potential significance. Funding increased dramatically, with multinational research teams establishing permanent monitoring stations across the 7 identified sites. Margaret Thompson, who had provided crucial early documentation, passed away shortly after the conference. Her personal archives were donated to MIT's Research Center, ensuring that her late husband's pioneering observations would be preserved for future generations. The mystery of Flight 117 was never fully resolved, but the research had transformed an isolated incident into a comprehensive scientific investigation. It revealed a complex network of interconnected sites that suggested these were not random occurrences, but part of a larger, previously undetected planetary system. Elena Rodriguez received the International Scientific Achievement Award for her groundbreaking work. The electromagnetic sites continued to pulse with their silent energy, a reminder that our world contains far more complexity than we can currently comprehend. An unexpected footnote emerged. Indigenous communities near these sites reported subtle changes in local ecosystems, suggesting a deeper connection between geological anomalies and environmental systems that remain to be fully explored. Subscribe if this story interested you, and you want to hear more like it.